Hi, everybody, and welcome to the one and only Facebook and YouTube live test we're going to do this month because we kind of got it down now, and we're just going to make sure tonight that all the technical stuff is working. So why don't we just start with that curtain thing, Hartley, because, Hartley Powers does all of our technical stuff. She's quite brilliant at it. So we love the curtain thing because it's just our thing. Others are using it now, but it's our thing. So Hartley, could you do that curtain thing just right now, and then we'll start. Oh, that was wonderful. Anyway, instead of playing the piano tonight, because I get just too nervous and too whacked out having to play and sing at the same time, we thought it would be fun to do a Q&A, question and answer. So to that end, I put up on Facebook, ask me your questions and I will answer them for you. And you did, and I will. So let me just start with the most frequently asked question that I get, which is, what does Kritzerland mean? So I'm going to tell you. Back in, I'll try to keep this short, but at my age, there's no keeping anything short. Back in 2001, anybody remember 2001? It was a space odyssey for sure. It was a horrible year in so many ways, including the horrible, disastrous 9/11. And it was a personally horrible year for me, with the exception of a couple of things. But back in March of that year, I had a record label, which I don't name anymore. And I had begun to realize that I was in bed with people financially that I should not have been in bed with. We'll just leave it at that. And so that was happening. But in March of 2001, I had been swearing that I wanted to write a book for 15 years. Every year I would say, I want to write a book. My friend Dick Lochte, who's a wonderful, wonderful writer, in 1985 had written his first novel, mystery, won an Edgar Award for it. It was a wonderful book. And I was so inspired by him, but every time I would say, but I don't know how to write a book. What am I going to do? Poor, poor, pitiful me. So anyway, in March of 2001, I finally said to myself, shut up. Don't ever say the word book again in terms of you writing one, unless you're going to do it. You've never been scared of anything in your life, so either do it or don't do it. And I decided to do it right then and there. So I decided to write what I know. They always say that, to write what you know. And I decided to write a book about my childhood in Los Angeles and my, let's call them a wacky, dysfunctional Jewish family. It was going to be cathartic for me to do, needless to say. Especially, I had a very contentious relationship with my mother and somewhat with my father and totally with my brother. But I knew right away that I was everybody who was based on a real person in the book, which was everybody, was going to get their real initials. So I knew the lead character, based on me, was going to be a BK, and I had decided to use the name Benjamin. I thought of that right away, and I love that. So I had Benjamin, and I couldn't start until I had the name. It's just I couldn't do it. So I had my Toshiba laptop open and ready, and I struggled. I just searched and searched and searched for K names all over the place. And I had recently recorded the cast album of the York Theater production of Godspell, which had a young up-and-coming cast of incredible people who all went on to, am I speaking in English, ladies and gentlemen? Who all went on to major careers, pretty much all of them. And anyway, I was struggling for this last name, and I happened to go on a theater chat board, and someone had posted, what is this person from Godspell up to? And the person happened to be Leslie Kritzer. And I tell you, the minute I saw the name Kritzer, I went, holy smokes, that's it. There's no other name. I went to my Toshiba laptop, typed Benjamin Kritzer on the title page, and began writing the book. I called Leslie, by the way, and I was going to be in New York the following week, so I called her and took her to lunch and told her I was stealing her name. Anyway, that book I began writing that book. I had my wonderful muse, my friend Margaret Willick Jones, who has been my muse on all 20 books, but started with that book, and she was very encouraging. I didn't know if it was bad or good. I didn't know about anything about writing a book. I just wrote. And in any case, to make a long story long, I finished the book in December of 2001 after the tumultuous goings-on of 9/11 and having this record label come to an end with me. And also my daughter, the one great thing of that year, my daughter got married. So anyway, we published the book. It came out the following June, and I kind of wrote, anyway, it was a wonderful experience, and here is the book. It's called Benjamin Kritzer, which I'm reading backwards, of course. Looks like Nimage Neb Res Tink by Eker Blemick. Anyway, you're seeing it the right way. So there's that cover is gorgeous. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So anyway, the last line of the book that I wrote, everybody said to me, you know, you're going to write a sequel, right? I said, well, no. I just wrote this book so my daughter would know what my life was like as a kid. And they said, no, but this last line. So I'm not going to tell you what the last line is, but I went back and read it. And yes, it really sort of meant I should write a sequel, and I did. So I started that book right then in July of 2002. And I wrote that. It took me 9 months to birth the first book and 4 months to birth the sequel. And I came up with the title right away because in the book, Benjamin Kritzer is in school, and they're doing geography lessons, and he hates geography, so they're learning about Switzerland, and he just zones out and starts to doodle and creates his own country called Kritzerland, where he can be in charge and everything happens the way he wants it to, you know, like we'd all like to have that country, wouldn't we? So anyway, I finished the second book, and it was called Kritzerland, and that's where the name comes from, because I could not clear any other name in terms of a website or a trademark or anything. So that book came out, Kritzerland, beautiful cover also, isn't it, by Eker Blemick? And then I happened to write a huge cliffhanger ending in that book. So there had to be a third book, and I suppose I always knew there would have to be a third book, and that was took this character from where we left off in the second book through his high school years. And that book was called Kritzer Time. Now, let me tell you something interesting, and then I'm moving on to your questions. So those three covers, by the way, were done by a brilliant artist who also happened to be a brilliant musical theater composer. In fact, wrote the longest running musical in musical theater history, Harvey Schmidt, who wrote the fantastic 7-1-10 in the Shade and I Do. And he had started out as an artist, and I just asked him to do it, and he did it, and he did such, I can't tell you the thrill of getting those paintings, which all hang in my home now. Anyway, he did those things, but I'll tell you two little anecdotes about the first book. You know, it was getting a lot of stuff off my chest and everything. And one thing I wrote about was my father, who would come home every night at 5 o'clock from his restaurant. He was a restaurant owner, owned a wonderful steakhouse called the Cairo near Western and Wilshire. And he would come home and we would eat at 5 because that's when Jews ate back then. And after dinner, he would go in the bathroom for about 2 hours. We wouldn't see him. And then he would come out and he would take off his clothes and put on his pajama top and nothing else. And that is how he would sit around the house every night. It was Halloween every night at our house, ladies and gentlemen. And the other one is my grandfather, who I really didn't like. His name was Dave Gross. And he was a very surly individual, always had a cigar in his mouth, but very funny in one way, which is that whatever plate of food they would put in front of my grandfather, whether it be steak or chicken or mashed potatoes or string beans or pie or cake or whatever it was, he would look at the plate of food and say, "What is it, fish?" That became the line of my life. I have used that line forever. What is it, fish? So I thought it would be fun tonight to do a What Is It Fish Along. What do you think? Are you up for it? Okay, here we go. Are you ready? On the count of three, everybody, what is it, fish? 1, 2, 3. What is it, fish? I think we can do better, ladies and gentlemen. You have to put a little Jew in it, I think. So let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. What is it, fish? Very good. That was so, you're all honorary Jews now. That was so good. And the capper to this story is that when I told Harvey Schmidt, when he was doing the first cover, this story, he thought that was the funniest thing he ever heard. And he called me literally every day for the next 6 months. And I would pick up the phone. There was no identifier on the phone in those days. You didn't know who was calling. But I would pick up the phone and I would hear this. What is it, fish? Because Harvey was from the South. What is it, fish? So it was every day for 6 months. It was very amusing to me. Anyway, let's get to your questions. Because that was a long story. Anyway, here we go. Marshall Harvey asks this question. Marshall's a wonderful film editor, by the way. How many songs have I written in my life? And I don't know how to determine that, actually. A lot. There's over, I think, 200 in the shows alone. And then if you do the standalone songs and stuff I wrote when I was really young, I have notebooks filled with that stuff. It's probably 400 or 500 songs. And he also asks if I've ever played tennis with my very close personal friend, Guy Haynes. And you know, I have tried, ladies and gentlemen, I have tried over the years to play tennis, but he never shows up. Other than being in the studio with him, he has never shown up for anything. Anyway, moving on. What was, I think this is, I can't remember who asked this. I didn't write down the name. Sorry, whoever it was who asked this. What was David Cassidy's favorite Partridge Family song and why? And I would have to assume it was I Think I Love You. I don't know this for sure, but I know that was hugely popular and he sang it all the time, so I would have to think it was. I really, my personal favorite is the one he sang in my first episode. It's One of Those Nights. So that's mine. Anyway, Paul Dellett asked, will you ever co-write another song with Richard Sherman? And the fact is, I've written 2 with him, 2 roads, and we wrote a song for his musical Levi together, one song, because there was one place in the show where we thought we needed a song and it didn't exist. And since there was only one Sherman brother, I wrote it with him and that was great fun. And I would do it instantly. Richard, are you listening? Anyway, Gary Olson asks, what is my favorite memory of working with Laurie Beechman? Oh my goodness. And are there any unreleased tracks that we recorded? I loved Laurie so much and she left us way too soon. And we had that thing. I met her because she asked to have a meeting with me. And I went up to her agent, Jim Wilhelm, and I wasn't keen on doing anything because I thought she was a loud singer, and she was a brilliant loud singer. But she wore me down, basically. She said, I just really want to work with you. I'll do anything you want. We can do any kind of album you want. So anyway, I said, okay. And she turned out to be the most joyous, wonderful, beautiful human being ever. And we had the best time in the studio. And then, but my favorite memory is walking down Broadway with her arm in my arm. And I was telling her about this idea for an album I had, which was songs of inspiration from Broadway shows with our usual group of singers. And I hoped she would be on it. And she looked at me and she literally grabbed me by the shirt on Broadway and said, I have to do that album. That's my album. You can't give that to anybody else. You can't have other singers. So I said, okay, Laurie, it's yours. It's yours. I did not know at the time. Nobody knew at the time she had cancer. So that album was hugely meaningful to both of us. And I miss her every day. And she was one. And no, there are no unreleased tracks, sadly. They're all on the recordings, but she was something special. Next up, Barb Schlamp Collantine. I hope I'm pronouncing these names correctly. Who was your biggest influence in TV work? That's an interesting question. I don't know. As an actor, I don't know that there was anybody really. I mean, I loved people. I loved Jack Benny, my favorite, and I loved Red Skelton in my youth, and Danny Kaye. Oh, you know, comic actors, I suppose, the great comic actors. And also, she wants to know who was your biggest influence in musical theater, and that I can tell you was Anthony Newley. And I told that story last month. When I saw Stop the World, I wanted to be just like him. I wanted to write songs, I wanted to direct, I wanted to star. So huge influence on me. And then Margaret McFarlane asks, she says, I love your sketch comedy work. She's one of the few who has seen that. And also, you're so good in your episodic roles. Which did you prefer? And how was your preparation for those roles different or similar? The sketch comedy is a world unto its own, I will say, because it's all about the jokes. Whereas sitcoms or comedy films are not always about the jokes. You can do as much with a look or a take or a thing, but it comes from a very real place. And for me, sketch comedy comes from a real place, but I only did it a few times, and I loved doing it. I did it on I did 4 Donnie and Marie's with Cindy Williams, and I always wrote our sketches, and those were great fun. And then I had done a CBS series, a summer replacement for Carol Burnett, and we did sketches on that show, and Cindy came on and did my favorite sketch I've ever written. The only difference between me and other people who did sketch comedy on television is I never, ever used a cue card. They were so shocked at this, but I couldn't have my eyes wandering like that. That is, to me, anti-comedy. Whenever you see Bob Hope, and he's brilliant at it, but whenever you see his eyes go like that, it's like, okay, cue cards. Anyway, that's the answer to that question. Greg Bateson, whatever happened to Vinny? Now, Vinny Cirilli was my longtime engineer on all of the albums I did, literally until the label came to an end, the second label I was with. And it was a real partnership. I loved him and still do dearly. He was one of the first people who got involved with Pro Tools, and he convinced me to use it. And he became so huge in that world that he is one of the key Pro Tools operators for movies, all the huge, big A-list movies he operates Pro Tools. So he just never had the time, and I wasn't recording as much anyway. So that's what happened to Vinny Cirilli, and he's very, very successful. Bill Graff, did you ever have lunch with Dinah Shore? I mentioned Dinah Shore and her new best friends. And I think maybe they catered lunch for us one time, and when she was there. She wasn't there a lot. We would tape everything that we did on the show without her, and then she came in for one afternoon and taped all her stuff. But I will tell you, she always asked me to sit next to her. She really liked me, and I loved her, let me tell you. But you'll notice in any shot with her, I'm next to her. He also asks, what do you miss most about LA? I miss C.C. Brown's, the real C.C. Brown's. And I miss the charm and the uniqueness of the city, you know, without all the junk that they've done to it since, like tearing down everything that I loved. But there's still a few things there that I love. And this is a great question. Have I ever regretted being too blunt? Oh, I don't think so. I am blunt. I'm never blunt in the studio with singers or anything, or directing, and I don't do that much. Well, I have been blunt with directing, but I don't have an edit button in that regard. I just think you cut to the chase, and hopefully everybody understands that you're just doing it to get what you need. I'm certainly blunt on the Facebook, however, as some people are well aware, but I don't regret it. No. What song are you most glad you didn't write? Probably I Write the Songs, which I had to sing on the Dinah Shore show. Very weird. I kept telling, I do write the songs, but they made me sing I Write the Songs, and anyway. Or Dinner for One, Please, James. I never would have wanted to write that song. What is your most treasured possession? My daughter, although I don't think she's a possession, but if I had to say a thing, like an item, I would say my most treasured possession is an original James Thurber New Yorker cartoon from 1938, one of his most famous and most anthologized cartoons. I suppose I could show it to you because it's hanging on the wall, literally right next to me. Here it is. That's an original James Thurber New Yorker cartoon. I love it. It took many, many years to get it. Anyway, Adrian Russ, our very own Adrian Russ, asks, what is an album you'd like to produce that you haven't been able to produce yet? If I were to do a studio cast album, it would be Lolita, My Love, because I love the score and was going to do it until somebody got in the way of it. But Liza Lerner was all for it, and I had even cast it, but that didn't happen. I would love to do Lolita, My Love. I just love the music and lyrics. Problematic as the show may be. Susie Sternkopf asks, have you ever done a best of Kritzerland? No. We thought about it, but we have done certain songs several times. But my God, this is long, 21 minutes, isn't it? I've been talking for 21 minutes. I hope this is interesting to somebody. Anyway, we haven't, because I just enjoy doing new things all the time. But we certainly could do a best of. I know what my favorites are. And she asks if we'll ever do a CD, a best of CD. And I wouldn't do them of the live performances because the sound isn't good enough for me. But you never know. I might take everybody in the studio when we're allowed to go outside again and do that. And finally, Jermaine Wissett, who I knew in high school as Jerry Lowe, said, what was your first Broadway show seen actually on the Broadway? That's very simple. 1968, December, I arrived on just before Christmas with my then wife. And I know the first show we tried to see, we went to the box office. I think we got in at 7 and we immediately walked over to Times Square and from our hotel, and we went to the Schubert right away and tried to get tickets for Promises, Promises, and just to get a pair anywhere in the theater, but they really had just opened 2.5 weeks before that, and they were completely sold out. So we walked across the street to the St. James, and I got a wonderful pair of seats to see Pearl Bailey in Hello, Dolly. So that was my very first Broadway show on Broadway. And then a week later, I did see Promises, Promises, and great. However, the first show I was meant to see on Broadway and didn't was I Do. My Aunt Bella, not my Aunt Bella, my Aunt Minnie, had gotten tickets for me. I was coming into town for one day, and we got in late. Something happened, and our flight was postponed or something, and we got in just about a half hour too late. So I never saw I Do, which should have been my first. Anyway, that's the questions. So hope you enjoyed this live Facebook and YouTube live test, and we will see you on Sunday. We are so excited about this show. The music of Candor and Ebb with an absolutely unbelievably amazing cast. Please come. It's 5 o'clock Pacific Daylight Time and 8 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. We'll see you on Sunday.